Hello, everyone. I'm in the Zoom.
Turn it on.
Oh,
It's okay.
sit down, take a breath. I was just about to say, why don't we just go ahead and open? Instead, we'll let you do that.
We have to start sitting on each other's laps here. It's gonna be redesigned.
That way I don't have to run the meeting and take minutes, because I was like, I'm gonna screw
That could be
something
tough.
up.
Definitely.
So I don't know if Chris officially turned us on yet. You guys are on. We're on.
Super. All righty. Thank you. Let's open the meeting. Finance Board meeting of February 5th, 2025 at 5:03, it looks like. What do you have?
I have 4.
5:04. So, we'll start off with welcoming the new members, although I don't have the names. I know Brian, right?
Brian Canzaro.
Chris.
And Chris.
Sanborn.
Chris Sanborn.
Yes,
So,
very nice
welcome,
meeting.
welcome.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to have new help,
Well, I'm sure we
new
hope.
ideas. Hopefully, we're going to add some positive things to the meeting. So we'll start off with the fiscal 2026 budget meeting, which is going to kick off with the town accountant, right? Treasurer collector, okay. I knew I had it somewhere in there. Take it away.
Good evening.
I'm Michelle Began, treasurer collector. We've been busy in the tax office with collecting Q3 taxes. We have first commitment of excise taxes going out tomorrow, so be on the lookout for those. What? Collection.
We're all gonna get our excise tax bills, hurrah. I mean, I guess you want to start off with the bad news and then move into the good news, right?
I don't have any bad news. Good news is that, you know, this year, this fiscal year, we started outsourcing our bills, which has, you know, helped the office free up some time, because that was a time-consuming process to print the bills, stuff them, mail them. We were having senior work-off people help us, but it still added a lot of time to our day. So that has been great. We saved money on postage with that too, because they can do a bulk rate, which we can't do here on our postage machine. So we save about, on postage, about $350 somewhat dollars for that. I also took a lead in looking into our accounts and closing accounts that weren't earning us a lot of interest and moving that around. So moving accounts into better interest-bearing accounts. So we're making better income from those accounts, which is great, especially when rates were so much higher earlier in the year, last year. Tax title accounts, I've been able to clean up a few of those and get them off the books. Some of them, most of them were just leftover pieces of land that contractors didn't want to pay anymore and left them in tax title. I got them to pay those off. Some of them were, those contractors donated to abutters. So, and a couple of others, I think the town was interested in taking them, Mike Dempsey maybe. No, those ones went to abutters. Just a couple of small pieces of land, but they get off the tax title account, which then gets off of our overlay. And then we had some payroll upgrades. So we went and upgraded the payroll system with time and attendance, so everyone is able to online do their timesheets, and they are able to see, request vacation, time off, sick, whatever, and then they get to see that on their paychecks. So that's been a welcoming upgrade. Townspeople the employees seem to like that, and saves a lot of time of waiting for people to come in with their timesheets, getting them approved from their department heads. So it's beelined payroll a lot faster than taking an all-day approach to doing payroll. It takes, you know, less than a day now to do it. And I think that's it for the good news.
So I'll start really quick, because I don't have too many questions. What does it cost you now to outsource the printing and mailing? You save $300 on postage. What's it cost?
Yeah, it's 40 cents per bill they charge us. So, and we mail out about 2,500 bills a quarter. Sometimes it's a little less. And they can put those parcels that have the same owners in the same envelope as well.
And I noticed the request, the assistant treasurer wages is flatlined. Is that right?
So we had all departments level fund their salary line items with the attempt, based upon initial budgetary conversations, to provide a 2% cost of living increase to all employees. It's a lot easier on our end to apply it in that fashion, because a lot of times people just put a 2% on what they assume is your salary, but many of the employees here are hourly. So we need to take that into consideration with the number of weeks we have per fiscal year. So it makes it a little bit cleaner. And if there are any requests to exceed a 2%, then departments are able, like we saw in former meetings, to come before the board and express their interest to go before the select board and request an additional increase, as that would be the authority of the select board to grant. So that's why you're seeing a flat on the salary.
Great. And contract work expense, refold?
Yep, so this current fiscal year, for last year, I was taking the postage out of that equation, and for tracking purposes, it was getting a little confusing, so instead, it was recommended that we just put the postage along in that line instead of separating it out. So it was just, when I was entering bills, I would take, the postage, two line items for actually one invoice. So with removing that and just putting it all in contract work, because it comes on one invoice, the postage and their fee.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's easier to track in our software that way.
And the other reason additionally is that we added a small contingency to that line item, because what we end up finding during the year is that if there's a subdivision that comes online, then the quantity will increase, as well as sometimes we don't find out about a postage increase until January, but our fiscal year budget is set in July. So, we determine such in April and begins in July. So we try and make sure that we have an understanding that there could be some flexibility there as well.
Yeah, I'm in that business, we do a lot of that, so I understand that. All right.
Yeah, the postage went up 8 cents last year, which we didn't account for.
Yeah, no, it went up again.
Not for letters, but I'm sure that's coming.
Yep. Oh, I guarantee it's coming. All right, thank you very much. I guess we'll start to my right and work our way down, if that's okay with everybody. So you have the floor.
Excellent. You say you rolled the postage expense into the contract work, but we still have a line item for a postage expense?
Yeah, postage never comes down, so I'd like to leave it like that because the whole town uses that postage machine. They do, I don't know if all of the departments do it, but they do have a postage line, but, like Sam and Annie's, they mail out the green envelopes. That goes up in price. You can't, it's like $9 to $11 just to mail something certified now. So I'd hate for that to come down and be short.
So another reason as well is that for personal property tax bills, we still mail out the personal property, correct? It's,
I've just, yes, because they didn't bulk mail those items, so that we have 60 personal property bills, so it is, I can do them myself and save the 40 cents per bill, because they didn't give us any discount on that postage for those personal properties. They didn't bulk them in with the rest of the 2,500 parcels.
so we would have to go through the process of assembling the letters and sending them out quarterly, so the postage has to be applied to the postage line item as well.
Fair enough. That's all I had.
Mark? Brian?
Yes, I have, actually, it's a two-level question. The first one, you had mentioned at the beginning of your dissertation about you had moved some money in certain accounts to an interest-bearing accounts. Could you just kind of give a brief explanation as to what is meant by that?
Yeah, so one of our accounts is a poor and needy fund. It was just sitting in a regular checking account, not earning, I think it was earning up to 2%. I moved it with the MMDT, and it's earning over 5%. So the interest income for that is, it's been larger just in the past year. I did it in January of 2024.
Okay, and Okay, thank you. And that leads me to my second question. Where these are interest-bearing accounts, the taxes that are due on that interest, could you explain to the board how that gets taken care of? As far as who pays the taxes on the interest that's on that account?
We're a
Would you know that?
municipality, we don't pay taxes.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
tax exempt.
Yep, okay, thank you. That answered my question.
Chris it is, right?
Yes.
Okay,
I
thank
have no questions, thank you.
Okay, right on down the line. Ruth and Jim?
I just have a question. Do you know of any towns that have an opt-out feature for not getting doing electronic versus paper?
For direct deposit,
Yeah.
anybody that's fathered in can get a paper copy of their check, but we require them to be direct deposit. It's just because of fraud nowadays. We had something recently come through that a check was written for waste management, and, you know, all of our checks are uploaded from our software to the bank. They caught it. So someone got that check somehow, changed it to somebody's name, and it would have been like a $61,000
Well, how
loss.
about like real estate bills? Could I opt out and only want to get them electronically?
I have not heard of any town doing
Yeah.
that, but that would be fabulous if we could figure that out.
All right.
Yeah. Something I'll look into.
Anything else,
I'm
Jim?
all set now.
That's a great point. I mean, almost everybody has a opt-out, you know, go paperless on their websites nowadays. It would be something to look into. Not only is it a cost savings, but you get a double whammy because you don't have to cut down a tree anymore.
Right, cost of paper, everything. I know there's been questions for that, and I know our online provider, City Hall Systems, where you can go and pay your bill and print a copy of the bill, you can set up for an email to have them billed. But I think legally, we have to, by Mass General law, we have to mail a bill, but I don't know if there's some opt-out thing. But I'll definitely look into that.
Now, you touched on something that triggered something in my mind, and that was the check fraud. We've been experiencing a ton of that ourselves, where check looks identical, but the payer is made out, you know, it's somebody different, and it's crazy. So we've gone to try to move exclusively to ACH payments, which are just almost, you know, it's tough to beat at that point, right, the fraud. Have we thought about moving that way and moving away from the physical checks?
I do that with the bigger checks. So I do pay like our health insurance that way, the bigger checks. I did reach out to Waste Management to see if they wanted to move to that direction. I can pay them through ACH, and they never got back to me.
Yeah, it's much more convenient for all the businesses because the funds are immediately available. The potential for fraud is drastically reduced, and we don't have to, there's much less paper to, you know, be shoved around and stored and archived and such. So I don't know if there's a plan maybe to move forward aggressively toward that, to eliminate or reduce the potential for fraud going forward, because these guys are getting better and better every day at it, gotta be honest with you.
I was going to say, our latest issue that occurred was just mind-blowing. When you did look at the check, it literally looked like the check that we had issued, and then you just see like the bottom, and it was a different state. And you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't add up. So if they would have not added that extra line or deleted that extra line, it would have never been caught. So it has become very sophisticated, and I know that Michelle has been on top of that, and I know that we've talked about trying to put protections in place, and maybe it is more so going to the ACH direction. And we can definitely develop more of a policy to ensure that we can prohibit that as much as possible.
Yeah, because we use Posi Pay too. I introduced it when I first got to where I am because but we found that it still doesn't eliminate, you know, the real cunning thieves out there.
No, we do get that with a lot of payroll stuff. Please change my checking account. And
Oh, yes.
that, the email looks, it signed the person, it looks very legit.
Yeah, I tried to get a physical address from this person one time so I could have the house swatted, just to have some fun, but they, stopped communicating anyways. But thank you very much. Thank you. Everybody else set?
No, I was just going to, on that same last topic, there must be a fair amount of best practices and guidance. It must be a very, topical kind of thing. So I would think between the state, the treasurers, whatever collaboratives you have, even the detectives, the police, I would think that there'd be a fair amount of guidance and best practices for those kind of protections.
There's always talks of that on the treasurer collectors. They always do classes on best practices.
Right.
It hasn't been totally moving towards ACH because a lot of municipalities do, like, every warrant could be 100 and somewhat checks.
Yeah.
So it makes it a little bit difficult, but something they're working on, trying to come up with a better plan for sure.
Even a policy over a certain threshold to protect the town might
agree.
be something to,
I've been trying to do that with bigger amounts, Pentucket School will be the next one I reach out to,
yeah.
because that should be.
And the town accountant had recently worked on a fraud risk assessment policy that we put in place, and to your point, we can definitely take that as a starting point and expand on that and see if there's ways that we can add some additional protections and measures for exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like you said, it can't be just Groveland, as Bill is saying, so we can definitely work towards something and most likely probably present something to the finance board to see that we've actually moved forward with that after town meeting.
Just for my own education, is that insured, if there's fraud?
We do have a certain cover under our insurance with Maya. I don't recall the specifics, but I can get them for you.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that the bank holds you,
Yeah. It's a tough thing.
what they say, there's a legal term for it, but you're not responsible for it. They're supposed to catch it, and that's what the reason for Posse Pay. You email them the set of checks to pay the amounts ahead of time, and if anything goes through that's not on the list, it should automatically be kicked out as fraud, so, they should be catching it. But a great place to start, because they're the ones most at risk, is the bank. Call the bank and say, listen, I've got this problem, and you're the guy suffering the most because I'm left, harmless by the actions of these people, but you're the ones at risk of losing tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I bet they have a lot of ideas because they've experienced a lot of it. The fraud detection department, I'll bet, is a good place to start for ideas on what we could do to protect ourselves going forward. Just a thought.
Yeah, really.
Good? Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for all you do for the town. I know we all can't say it on a daily basis, but we appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I'm up, right?
All righty, moving right along. We will now move to the treasurer collector, correct?
No.
Town accountant. Jeez. All right, sometimes, I'm terrible with names.
How are you?
Never better. How about yourself?
Pretty good.
All righty.
So I didn't really ask for anything. I just wanted to move 500 from my expense line to the education line.
Nope.
There's been a couple of classes and seminars that I didn't have enough money for and wanted to take a few years, so I think that would help with that, especially Governor Healy resubmitted the, I always want to call it modernization, but that's the old one. And then I got modernization stuck in my head, and I can't think of the other word, empowerment, the Municipal Empowerment Act. She just resubmitted it, so I think there's going to be a lot of new things to learn with that. And they'll probably have a lot of classes and seminars, and most will probably be free, but there's usually some pretty good ones that you want to pay for. So that's why I wanted to do that. Otherwise, I'll just give you updates. Our audit was done. They finished their field work in December for FY '24. They said it went very well. So I'm looking forward to getting those. I actually had emailed Laura, who's our audit manager, asking, she had said maybe like March 31st, but we tend to get them a little earlier. So she said she's hoping in the next 3 weeks or so. She just answered me like 2 seconds ago, so that was nice timing. That we should get our FY '24 financials, which I don't think we're supposed to have many management letter comments. In FY '23, the bank rec one got resolved, and then fraud risk assessment and the federal internal control policy has been resolved, so you'll see those, they'll be listed on there, but they'll say resolved, because they do comparable years. So that will be great to see. It's been a long time coming. Other than that, what I'm working on, I think my FY '25 goals were the GL renumbering and the 5-year forecast that really detailed. So I'm still working on those. I'm actually deciding to put the GL renumbering on hold for a little while, just because we're having a lot of changes like the highway and all that, and I don't want it to come back to, you know, when we go to look at the budget, there's all these lines, and we just built this new GL, and there's still all these lines everywhere. So I'm gonna set that aside for a little bit until all of that's finalized. The forecasting, I'm about a third of the way through. Come March, I should be able to plow through that a little quicker. I am tackling the more difficult sheets first. So, you know, when you get sick of it, you're more on the easy breezy parts. It's kind of easier to tackle it that way in my mind. And then for FY '26, I'd really like to take that and implement it with all those financial goals and indicators in our finance policy, and work on like a guideline on how to use that during budget season. Because budget season, you do have to look at prior year actuals, obviously, but you really want to try to start with the forecast, analyze the prior year actuals, and figure out how to combine them, because the forecast has all those goals in it that you want to reach. So it's a really good guideline to start with, but forecasts change, you know, they change much more than a budget would. They're kind of a constant running. So I want to incorporate sort of a step-by-step process on how to do that. So we're not doing all this work and then having it just sit there. So that's my budget and kind of what's rolling in the county department.
Cool. I'll start again. So the $500 is for these new seminars?
Yeah, I just moved it from my expense line into the education line. So the budget itself is not going up.
I could prioritize on where to get more money as far as the seminars go. Like, if the classes, how to get more money from the state, sign up twice. We need it.
Okay, yes, I will.
GL chart of accounts reorganization, what a bear.
Yeah, it is. I have it almost all built, but there's like a couple of question marks with those few departments that we're gonna change, and I'm like, I would really hate to implement this and then have to change it all around again. So it's very far along in the process, but I'm putting it on hold
Yeah, I know
until
what you
we're 100% sure, because it's kind of, when you make changes like that, the year you make the change is sort of how did it work out? Okay, well, now we want to kind of alter this because this will work better, and then that will change the numbering again, and then you're back to this again. So once we really determine the best way for those to work is when I'll fully implement it and talk to Vadar, and
Yeah.
Vadar's our accounting software.
Right.
For the
I think
new
you're better
people.
off implementing to it at year end.
Yes, so it starts
So it's
7/1.
fresh and clean, you've
Yep.
got a nice cutoff.
Exactly.
But I walked into a place with over 2,000 accounts. I mean, even GE didn't have that many. I was like, oh my God, with all this stuff.
Right.
It gets to be crazy. Forecasting, so you're looking to develop like a rolling forecast, like a, future-looking 13 months kind of thing? Where
Yeah, you
go
go
with the
about 5
actuals.
years, because when you go beyond 5, since it is a rolling and they do use sort of, so you would roll forward a year, you would use that to develop your budget. However, the budget finalizes, because it's not going to be exactly like the forecast. You can't predict the future or what's going to happen in budget sessions, or exact costs of things. But it gives a really great starting point. So then what you would do is when that budget is voted in, you would update for that. And then you'd roll forward 5 years from that new update and keep going from there and see the changes. You would readdress the goals every year. So your forecast wants to look at 5-year goals. Something might happen where one of those goals doesn't really make sense anymore. So you want to go over those every year, readjust for that, and then you use it to restart your budget process for the next year.
Right, so you're looking at 5 years out in yearly increments?
Yes.
Have you ever thought about breaking it down into smaller increments, maybe quarters? Because then you have more time to be flexible and adjust. Because after the year is gone, the year is gone. The only thing you can do now is do a postmortem, because the year is complete.
Right, but I
Look at it
wouldn't
quarterly.
adjust a forecast for a year, because your budget is set. I mean, we do our budgets on an annual. If we did, like a lot of companies do a monthly or a quarterly budget, if we did that, I would definitely
Well, no, you do the
do
yearly
that,
budget.
but,
But then you would say, take the yearly budget, divide it by 4, and then you'd measure it quarter by quarter against actuals and see how you're doing, and then you can better fill in future months or quarters
I see what you're saying.
in a more, precise way as opposed to a macro way, more of a, micro, mini.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Just
We
a
can
thought.
maybe get to that. We're not anywhere near that right now.
Yeah. I mean, it might
There are
make it-
a
it might
lot
help
of
you-
sheets and a lot of, you have to put union contracts in there, and you have to put
A lot of data.
a
I
lot
get
of the
it.
school data. These are the sheets I've tackled so far, and I'm just like, but,
I'm not unfamiliar with it.
yeah, exactly. So we're not there, but we could definitely get there.
Cool.
Are the schools doing a 5-year forecast? 'Cause we all know that.
I'm not
we-
the school finance
We're
person.
sitting here talking about $500. As you know, we don't have a lot of money to spend. And the school's a big part of this, so I don't know how you can exclude them or make them be better at forecasting, because they don't forecast now.
So in the forecast is built a lot of the head count. I haven't gotten fully to the sheet yet, and I'm a little familiar with DESI, but you're taking numbers from DESI, you're using them. So it would give us at least a starting point, and you could look at, the last year budget and what their board is talking about as far as goals and compare it to the forecast as well. And it would give us another tool to see if they're in line with that, and if not, why? Does it make sense that it's not? So it would definitely be useful in that sense, but,
You could also look at student population trends, up or down, and know which way you're going there, too.
right.
You might well start.
I'm good.
Mark?
I'm good, thanks.
No,
Brian?
I'm well, thank you.
Chris?
Just quickly, I appreciate your level funding your budget. I just hate to see you have to pull from your office supplies for professional development. Is there any way that we're able to absorb $500 somewhere that we don't have to sacrifice that? I can imagine office supplies are
I
going to go
don't
up.
have a lot of supply needs.
Okay.
Like accountants don't, we need a computer, I need a pen here and there. 1099s are my biggest expense. I am buying a chair this year. My chair is stuck in a position, so my arms are like this all day. But that doesn't happen every year. Accountants don't have large office expenses, so it would be great to have the 500. I'm not gonna say no, don't give it to me, but it's fine to move it. I don't think I'll be like, I don't have money for something. And when we moved all the offices, I had saved my budget to buy new furniture, so I'm good there too.
Okay. Thank you.
But I appreciate that.
Yes.
It seems like that's really a fallout of almost the technology budget going up. There's not as many supplies now that a lot of paper, all of this other stuff is all done virtually and upgrading the software and it has those other sort of follow benefits, so.
Absolutely.
I love doing the concept of doing the 5-year forecast, even if I know that there's going to be so many unknowns and it's not going to be perfect. I think it's still an exercise that might sort of glean, unexpected information too, that is almost aside from specifically that forecast. So I think that's a great exercise. I think I understand what you were saying, Bill, about doing it in smaller increments, but it's almost, in another sense, like you have to look at the full year because that incorporates so many, insurance payments might be upfront and stuff like that. But I think maybe what you're getting at is forecasting annually, but revisiting that forecast more than annually on
Yes.
the annual basis within the forecast kind of thing.
Versus
Yeah,
actual, right?
you would update it throughout the year.
Yeah.
If you found something out, you would definitely update it. Quarterly is good for trends. If you're looking for trends, I think
Yeah.
it's a great idea for that. It's a lot of information, so right now I'm just in the nitty-gritty of it. So FY '26, I want to use to sort of sit back and look at the bigger picture and analyze it and see how useful it is and how it can benefit us, and then add more details to it later.
Doesn't it also speak, though, the good news is, doesn't it also speak to the fact that processes are in place, processes have been upgraded, there's a lot more efficiencies added into the role, so now you have time for things like forecasts, which is a luxury that we just didn't have in the last, say,
Right.
5 or so years. So I think
Little
that's
bit of
great,
time.
too.
I get like one day every other week. I can work on special projects. That's when you see the shade go down. Like, don't bother me today, it's my one day.
Yeah.
To Ruth's point, I mean, looking ahead is never a bad thing.
Right,
Keeps you from crashing into the rocks.
right.
Jim? Or Ruth, are you done?
I'm done.
Jim?
Quick. I know you're going through an effort of title searches and things of that nature. Do we have a lot of we don't know who the owner is? I mean, we talking 50, 100?
That's more, Michelle would have a better answer. I don't think it's 50 or 100. Have you seen the list recently
No.
of the unknowns?
No.
I think it's been reduced,
Their taxes.
but I don't know. That's more of a treasurer.
It's been substantially reduced because
Yeah.
we are moving forward with doing land of low value. So if it has a certain value level, you can lump them together and go through the process through DOR, and then you can auction off those properties and get them off of the tax roll. The unknowns are a little bit more complicated because they require a lot of deed research and title research so that you can try and track down as far as you possibly can to where that unknown factor came into play. But I do know that with the move to contracting the services for the tax bills, it has opened up and freed a lot of her time to be able to focus on those initiatives and actually start moving forward with the foreclosure process on those properties and/or implementing payment plans for those individuals as well so that we can move those forward. But as to the amount, I'm not familiar with the total.
Yeah, I couldn't give you a count. I wouldn't be comfortable throwing a number of how many are out there, but I do not think it's a large number.
I agree.
And I will say, I just wanted to point out that Ellen has been instrumental recently. We have been working through collective bargaining. We currently have a CBA that we're negotiating with the police. And, I've had my spreadsheets in place to figure out the financial impact of what's being requested from the proposal. But with Ellen's expertise on Excel, just like Bill, she was able to put together a much more efficient workbook that we can just start to alter the numbers and play with the numbers, and then we can tie that into the larger budget and the expenses and how we can, forecast and/or explain how those will impact the budget in future years, so that when we are having those negotiations, we talk a little bit about the finances and we try to explain that, but in words, it's not as easy as looking at a spreadsheet and being like, click, oh, so you mean that this base rate gets compounded by XXX, and I'm really making this, and that will then carry over to the next fiscal year because that increase will then carry through. So it's been very, very helpful. So I did want to just mention that she'd been taking on a little bit more of this finance director type realm responsibilities, such as the forecasting, as well as helping with some of those CBA-related matters as well.
Fun, isn't it?
I do like making the spreadsheets. I'm a total nerd that way.
I know.
You have no idea how excited I was about it. I'm like, you gotta see this, you gotta see this.
Honest to
You
God.
just change it right here, the whole thing just flows
I
out to the
know.
budget.
Doesn't it give you such a drill? You
It
just get
does,
such a
yeah.
rush when you do that.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I don't know why. Everybody else all set? All right. Thank you again for your time.
Thank
and your
you.
dedication and all your commitment to the town. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ellen.
Do we know who is up next?
So you got your pick. So we can do the economic development, or we can do CPC.
Whatever you'd like.
Would you like to start with CPC? Okay, then I will start with the economic development, planning, and conservation. I have no good news to report, all bad. We made a decision last fiscal year to reduce the town planner line item based upon feedback from the select board at that time, and then use monies to provide for an executive coordinator for my office to help implement the day-to-day operations of the town. The intent was that with my background as a planner, that I would be able to fulfill those responsibilities and have the executive coordinator assist where possible. We also level funded the conservation agent line item. Originally, in prior years, what we've done is we've taken a portion of that salary from the operational budget, and then we also originally had a fee receipt account that we would then allocate a certain amount of monies to the agent's salary. We came to learn that Mass DEP would prefer us to develop a revolving fund, so what we ended up doing is taking the fee receipt account and allocating those monies to the expense line item, and then closing out that account and establishing a revolving account, which we did at the last town meeting. So the monies that they take in from the applications that go through the state will then generate revenue for them to use moving forward. So what those monies would be used for, again, would be to help fund the conservation agent salary. We did post a position. We did not receive any applications. We have made a conscious effort to reach out to surrounding communities to see whether or not we can regionalize and we can share services. That was something that we had done with our building commissioner. It has been extremely successful. However, many of the surrounding towns have opted for a full-time agent, which has made it very challenging for us to collaborate. Having worked with the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission in the past, we thought maybe that we could capitalize on their expertise and spend some of the monies to work with them so that they could potentially help us with the review of applications and with the Conservation Committee. That wasn't necessarily something that the Conservation Commission wanted to move forward with. But again, we still have the chair filling the role as the conservation agent and the executive coordinator who has a background in conservation and environmental planning, taking in applications, helping fielding calls, providing information, et cetera. So it's a little bit disjointed. It's all kind of focused in my office right now. So what you'll see as part of the proposal is that, you know, like I said, ideally, in a perfect world, we would want to have a full-time planner, a part-time conservation agent, and a part-time administrative assistant. In a small town like Groveland, that is not over-the-top type of structure. It's pretty straightforward. Financially, I don't believe that we can move forward in that direction, unfortunately. So for this fiscal year, I have suggested that we level fund what we have allocated for the town planner salary expenses so that when larger applications come through and/or zoning changes occur, like we're seeing with the MBTA zoning as well as the ADUs, we can enlist the support of a consultant to help us facilitate those discussions and bring resources to the town. Then we would level fund again the conservation age wait line, which is $15,000. We would then add an additional $6,120 to the administrative assistant line item. I strongly believe that given the workload that we have been given the executive coordinator from a planning and conservation standpoint is unreasonable, given the fact that she only has so many hours in the week to work, to do other tasks that are associated with my office and economic development and financial planning and other run-of-the-day type of activities. So when I have a Board of Selectmen meeting or a Finance Board meeting or a CPC meeting, or if I have a Economic Development Committee meeting or a Trash and Recycling Committee and it overlaps with the Finance Board or, the Planning Board or the Zoning Board, the executive coordinator will attend those meetings. So she will make herself available. She's up to date on the materials because when residents call, she's the first one that they get. So she can answer your call. Where is a plot plan? Why can't I get this? Can I put this shed on my house? Can I move this? Can I build here? So she's fielding those calls and she's taking on those responsibilities. And I think that it's only fair that we utilize that position, if she's willing to do so, and compensate accordingly, in addition to her responsibilities as the executive coordinator, and to separate the two. And then the other expense line items are all level funded except for the Merrimack Valley Planning, which is something that we don't necessarily control. It's an assessment that comes to the Regional Planning Agency. It cannot increase beyond 2.5%. So what I presented was 2.5% because they have not finalized that number. Once they do, it could be under, so that could come down. So there is a slight increase for this fiscal year. Next fiscal year, given what we just talked about and what I've outlined in the memo provided to you, is that we do try and move forward with some type of full-time position for that office. We were very successful when we found the conservation agent / town planner. They're a rare breed. You don't find planners and conservation agents in one position, but they do exist. And if you have a certain skill set, you could make it happen, but that would mean that you'd have to have an attractive salary. So we would like to, in fiscal year 2027, move in that direction, because it's a disservice to the residents, and it's also a disservice to you all, because if I don't perform those duties, then no one performs those duties. And there's far too much at stake if nobody's looking at that from a development perspective, from a grants perspective, from, again, even just MBTA zoning and the state coming down with regulations and things that need to be changed. If nobody's looking at them, if no one's reviewing them, if no one understands them, then obviously that's not a position that the town wants to be in. So relying on one person to fill multiple roles, as we've seen in the past, is not exactly ideal. So it will get us by, and I don't believe we're missing out per se, but we could do better. And I think that it's something that we need to be and show a little bit more of a conscious effort on. So for this year, it's very minimal. For next year, that is the plan. And I have talked to the Conservation Commission Chair, and he's in agreement. If we can get the salary up and we can find a competent individual like we did formerly, then it would be the best of both worlds, and that would eliminate the impact financially.
So you're looking at FY '27.
Yeah.
What are you estimating for for a salary?
So the standard salary, as I mentioned in my memo, is probably about, I think it was 78 to 87 is kind of the range for a decent planner, and what we had in a planner and somebody who could fulfill the agent role. And what we had before was around 80, 82. So it's kind of within reason, and what we're seeing in other communities as well.
And that would potentially, depending on the skill set, drop the 15K on the conservation agent as well.
I'm sorry?
Would that, if you found the right person, you could drop the 15K on?
We combine it together, whatever's been allocated and carried through, and then we'd add to it to
Yeah.
make one, like, $83,000 position like we did in FY '24.
Yep. So that's a bonus.
So that would combine the other 10, too, that's currently set aside as sort of consultant wage.
Exactly. So the goal is never to reduce whatever we had there now. It does help provide a buffer, support, it does give us some type of cushion. But we either need to slowly add to that and make a conscious effort to add to that, or we need to make a more dramatic change, like combining the roles and, the Hail Mary pass kind of situation. I mean, it does exist. We had a great person who filled the role of both town planner and conservation agent and did it very well. She was more of an expert in the environmental planning realm, but, I mean, it's all kind of the same if you have the right skill set.
Yeah, I remember years ago, we hired a town planner like that. Worked out well for us. Adam?
Is there any possibility to outsource the conservation agent role?
So we had formerly, the town, before they hired their town planner, back in 2018, good times, we did outsource our planning to Denise McClure. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with her firm, but she does planning in the area, and she also does Merrimack outsources their planning to her as well. So I have heard of it in the planning realm. I haven't necessarily heard of it in the conservation realm, but that doesn't mean that it wouldn't exist. So we could,
I feel like it's an avenue to explore and maybe, compare apples and oranges. On top of the salary, you get all the benefits that you got to pay into it as well. And that, we all know that just keeps going up and up and up.
it's true. We can take a look at that, and I do know that we had talked, like we said, whether it be the MVPC or a consultant, which is essentially what you would do if you outsource. It's just a matter of getting their rates, their hourly rates, and what that would do per the applications we receive for that year. It's a little hard to estimate how many applications we're gonna get. You can see more so on the conservation realm when it comes around like the April to the, fall area because of their restriction during the winter. But it's definitely something to consider. And something that I have brought forward to the Conservation Commission, although they're more reluctant to outsource.
Everyone's more reluctant to outsource, but, small town, small budget, got to put all the options on the table, I believe.
I would agree.
That's all I had.
Mark?
All set. Thanks.
Brian?
I don't really have anything at this time, thank you.
Reserve your right to
Well, I
say
was,
something later. Okay.
well, no, I was thinking of something, but it's not the right question to ask at this time, but I need more background, but thank you anyway.
Good enough. Chris?
Yes, just piggybacking on what was said earlier, I do believe there's a peer review process for conservation applications,
Yes.
that basically the application would be reviewed by an independent consultant, and that cost would be the burden of the applicant.
Correct.
So
We
is
have
that
an
something
escrow
that we
account.
could- Is that something that we could do? Are we talking about the same thing there?
Not necessarily, because an escrow account under Massachusetts general law is created for us to take money from an applicant to then review their application by a qualified consultant. So if it's an engineer or wetland scientist, to whether they review the wetland delineation or they're doing an ANRAD of some sort, we would then use that money to hire a firm to review it. But you can't use the escrow funds to do day-to-day work. So like the conservation agent, for example, they'll field the application, they'll timestamp the application, they'll make sure that the abutter notification goes out, that the applicant understands what they need to do. They will then facilitate the cross between the Conservation Commission as well as the consultant, as well as the applicant. What review has been submitted, has it been sent to everybody, that kind of stuff. So the escrow account is more so just for the technical review, not necessarily the facilitation of the process.
Okay, so we are using that process right now.
100%.
We still need a conservation agent.
100%. We do that for both planning and conservation and zoning.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Ruth?
I'm good.
Jim?
I'm all set.
Looks like you got off easy
For now.
for now. All righty, if nobody has any further questions, we can move on to either community preservation or town administrator.
I'll give you a reprieve. We'll go with the community preservation.
All righty?
So this year, we're entertaining 4 applications. We've got application in from the Congregational Church to make their bell ring. We've got one in on the community trail and doing some improvements to that. We've got one for 46 Washington Street to do some historic preservation on that building. And we have one to, Rebecca can speak to it better than I can, more or less set up the account so that we can start using some of the monies for affordable housing. We've also, over the past year, we've cleaned up a lot of expired projects and, did a lot of housekeeping and cleaning up of open projects and kind of got to a running list of what's still going on and where they stand.
Who's responsible for the Washington Street project?
It's a joint between Mike Dempsey and Claire Walsh.
How what's the estimated amount for that?
Off the top of my head, I don't have it. I don't want to misspeak, but it wasn't huge. It was replacing heating system, septic system, and windows, doors, and some brickwork. I can look it up real quick if you give
I
me a
can do
second.
it right now for you.
Perfect.
Which building on Washington? Is this the old?
The old water department
The old
building?
water department?
The water department.
So the amount requested for CPA funding was $122,000.
Do we know how much in total over the years has been put into,
Into various places.
well, into that particular project?
That particular one, they did a yard cleanup on, it was quite a while ago, but I don't think there's anything else in put in there. We're not talking Washington Hall. This
Yeah,
is-
Washington
okay.
Hall,
Washington
yeah,
Street,
that's why
this
I
is
was asking
different.
for that clarification.
Notice that old dilapidated brick building that you see. I think we use
Sort
it
of
for
further down the
storage.
bottom of the hill.
We did use it for storage for the Pentucket Regional School when they were doing their moving to the new building.
Yeah. Are we still archiving anything there anymore?
Currently, there's nothing there.
There's nothing there.
There is nothing there. It is a vacant building. We do insure it, and we do have insurance that we pay for the vacant building.
And for 122,000, what are we gonna turn an old dilapidated brick building into?
That,
TBD.
TBD.
Well, that information was not provided in the application. I encourage anybody who's interested, we're having the meeting next Monday night. Come on by. Get to the bottom of it.
So I want $122,000, but I ain't gonna tell you what I need it for. Interesting.
well, the 122, it is broken down. They want to replace the heating system for 32,000,
Oh.
replace the septic system for 40,000, repair and restore brick masonry for 22,500, environmental testing and abatement for 6,500, replace windows, doors, and paint exterior wood for $9,000, signage for 1,000, a 10% contingency of 11, for a total budget of $122,000. So there is specified amounts for what they want to do, but what they would do with the building after is not clearly listed out.
The end goal.
End goal of the building is
There's
unknown.
maintenance, like heating it while it's empty.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to leave that one alone, but
The Congressional Church bell?
Congregational church, yep, they've got the bell doesn't ring, the mechanism for the bell doesn't work, so they're looking to replace that.
But it's the Paul Revere bell, so it has huge historic significance.
Okay.
Lay it on,
Who owns the bell?
the church,
The church owns the bell?
yes.
Just
Yes.
To be clear, okay.
And how much was that?
25,000?
And this is the one around the corner here, right?
Yes.
Do they belong to the Archdiocese of Boston or
I don't know.
Roman Catholic Church?
We're having them come in and speak at the next meeting. Again, it's, we're still going through the process. None of these have been approved. We're still kind of digging them out as a committee and running through them. I have a lot of these same questions that you guys are bringing up now.
Can they get the Vatican to sell a painting or two? So?
No, it's not the Catholic Church. That's the one on King Street, the bottom of King Street. That's the Protestant church.
Oh, okay.
The Catholic Church is up on Center Street,
Center Street.
like
St.
Center in
Patrick.
Washington, that's St. Patrick's.
Yeah, yeah.
This one is the Groveland Congregational Church, right out here, right at the base of King Street. That's where the Paul Revere bell is.
What was the bell?
It's-
Paul Revere,
Can anyone date when Paul Revere made that bell?
Dates back to 1883.
Is what you mean by the bell work, is this just electrical work, or is it the actual physical replacement of the bell?
no, the bell stays, right? Paul Revere bell. That's the whole reason for doing this. It's just the mechanical
Bell.
bell banger.
Is there any electrical work involved with it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Am I correct in assuming these are all private facilities, or was the Washington Street one?
The Washington Street is a town-owned property, the community trails are obviously town-owned. The only private one is the church.
And do these fit into the town's capital plan for improvements? Or are there other priorities that the town has?
They do not, the trail is part of our open space and recreation plan, so that does follow suit in terms of our planning documents that we have implemented and have been vetted through the public engagement process. 46 Washington Street is not on any of our capital plans. It is mentioned as a town-owned building, and kind of, we have had conversations as to what we should be doing with the building, but it hasn't been really put on a plan or discussed. And then the Congregational Church would be outside of our control. But the affordable housing plan, or the affordable housing application that was put forward, is mentioned both on our housing production plan as well as our comprehensive master plan, and also our affordable housing implementation plan that was done.
Thank you.
Ruth?
No, I'm all set.
Brian?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Oh, actually, I do have one more thought on that. So when these community preservation applications are, usually when we vote them, we vote to move them to the warrant, and then the town meeting votes. And unless I think, whether I personally want that, think that that particular application is the best use of funds is not really my concern is more, is the application thorough, is it valid, is it appropriate? And then, whether I'm for or against it, I think the town should have the opportunity to consider it and to vote it. So that's where my favorable or unfavorable thought process comes from. And I just wonder if we should consider any more guidance besides just pushing it through to the town to vote on it? If-
So I've just taken over as chair of the
Right.
committee, and I kind of have the same feeling as you. What we're trying to do is vet the project. Is it a doable project? Can it be done in a reasonable amount of time? Does it benefit the town? Does it meet all the application criteria? Not so much personally, do you want it, do you not want it? That's up for the town people to decide, but is it a viable project? Does it have measurable goals?
Right.
Can it be achieved in a reasonable amount of time? Can the taxpayers get what they inevitably vote on?
Right.
So we're trying to make sure that all the Ts are crossed and the Is are dotted, and that it is a viable project before we push it forward or not.
Which has been absolutely fantastic, because I've been able to work with Adam on getting policies in place and applications drafted, and it has been, like Ellen said about the spreadsheets, very exciting. So it has been great working with somebody who wants to have just having a organized and very step one. Step
Right.
two, does it meet this? Does it meet that? Making sure we have POs, making sure we have monthly reports that are done. It's been fantastic.
So is there other information that could be provided to, so somebody shows up to town meeting and haven't been part of any of these conversations. They have 5 seconds to make a decision on $1 million, and they don't really, oftentimes, you even hear the conversations at town meeting, they don't even really understand that community preservation funds can't be allocated to non-community preservation endeavors. So, I don't know, I just, at this early stage, before we're rushing to publish the warrant, rushing to publish our booklet, is there other information that could be useful to somebody just showing up and making kind of a knee-jerk decision? Maybe yes, maybe no, I just want to sort of bring it up.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely an idea, I'll definitely bring up to the committee and we'll talk about. But what I don't want to do is put, the committee bias on it. I want to just present the facts, black and white, make your own decision. I don't want to say, hey guys, it's a good project. I'm not trying to advocate for a particular project or not. More so just making sure that all the information is available.
Right.
And all the questions have been asked.
And we've talked about, putting together and I believe we've mentioned it with this board, like a PowerPoint presentation moving forward that will have the warrant article, and then if there's something like we experienced last time where, you know, somebody wanted to see a plan, when we were talking about the parking lot, and they didn't know that there was a plan, and we had a board that was over to the side, and it was like, oh, look over there, but people are like, I'm sitting in my chair, this is happening, and like you said, that, okay, go, 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 go. So the intent is that if it's a larger project of that nature, either to have somebody get up and provide a presentation, and or have a slide that would give you a synopsis of what the project is, so that you're not just sitting staring at a, you know, words on a warrant being like, sure, I know exactly what this is.
One big thing for me is, my gripe is, we approved this upper limit, $850,000 parking lot. Well, where do we get those estimates? What goes into that? And it could be very well justified. I'm not an expert, but when I just see a high-level number like that, and I see parking lot, it looks egregious.
Listen, you're not going to find a bigger hater of parking lots than this guy right here.
It is very true.
Yeah, Rebecca will tell you. I complain about that one all the time.
Which is coming under budget by $200,000, by the way, and
That's great.
being
And credit to you for that.
ahead of schedule. So let's just get that out there
Awesome,
too.
awesome.
Just wait until the soccer group, all parents involved and from out-of-towners come in, and thank you for that.
I can't wait to go park my truck on it. The applications are accompanied by estimates. You know, obviously, the larger dollar ones need to go out to bid. But it's not just no one's just picking a number out of a hat. There is some level of documentation attached with it.
I don't remember seeing that last year. Did I just miss that?
So it is part of the application, and that's what we're talking about, and to Bruce's point and Adam, is to how do we get those documents out to the public?
Right, and that.
Yeah, and I completely understand, because as I was sitting at town meeting in the parking lot, oh, we're gonna spend $800,000 to build a parking lot. The end, you know, that's what's on the warrant, and that's not really enough information to make the decision.
Right.
So whether we can put together a booklet ahead of time, you know, kind of outlining everything, or how to go about doing it, I'm more than willing to entertain any ideas. And I would encourage anybody, like, our meetings are fun, you should come. It's a good time.
BYOB or what?
Absolutely.
Cool.
After the cameras are off.
Brian, did you have anything?
No, I'm all set, thank you.
Chris?
I'm good.
Ruth?
Yep, I'm good, thank you.
Jim?
All set.
All righty.
I'm off the hook.
You're all done for now.
I hope I did a good job.
You did marvelous. You passed the audition. Well, we've got the town administrator.
So I had given a little bit of an update the last time we had an opportunity to speak. As you'll see tonight, you have the Pentucket Regional School District budget that was discussed at the school committee meeting last evening, and the book was delivered to us today. It is also available on their website, and we will put a link on the finance board page directing residents to that page if they're interested in viewing that as well, if they're unable to just go onto the Pentucket Regional School website. They are looking for a 7.2% increase over the last fiscal year assessment, which was $11,566,398. They are looking for $12,394,581. That would be an $828,183 increase. As part of the draft budget that I've been putting together, I assumed a 3% increase, trying to give them something that's within the ballpark of what we've typically given, which is between a 2.5% to 3% increase over the last fiscal year. So if that is the case and they move forward with that number, we will need to move forward with an override of $481,000. We just don't have the monies in our budget to come up with that. As you've seen this evening, we're talking about $2,000 expense line items. You know, we pay our employees, you know, between $60,000 and $80,000. That's not $481,000. So you're talking massive cuts in order to accommodate what is being requested. So that was unfortunate news.
Not unexpected, I'm going to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, to be honest, that was his original proposal. And what we're doing now, too, is what do you want? And then we say, okay, now what do you need? And then we kind of go backwards. So I don't know, I think that hopefully the school committee will be reasonable to figure out exactly what will happen, but I know that Merrimack, they also got a 7.8% increase over their last fiscal year assessment, and they also need to come up with about $828,000, and they've already been discussing overrides due to other issues with staffing on the public safety side. So I don't anticipate the school moving forward with an override because two of the communities have already been very vocal that it's not going to pass.
When you were provided this information, did they give you a line item as to what those increases were needed for? Some sense as to what the extra 800,000 would be needed for?
So that's what you have in this book right here. So they will tell you and line out what it is that they're looking for their budget. I believe in the section 3, section 2, they actually have their line item budget. So you'll see their salaries, you'll see their materials, supplies, you'll see a bunch of different line items in which they allocate funding for whatever it is that they put forward. So with the school budget, that is the school. We, as one of the regional members, receive an assessment from the school, and that assessment is based upon the enrollment, and that percentage is applied after they take into consideration the state aid that they receive, Chapter 70 and other revenue, and they back into that with the minimum contribution that is required by law, and that's where we get our assessment. And then in addition to our assessment, we also get our capital assessment. Our capital assessment is a little bit, not really too much into our budget, but some of it is based on the debt exclusions that we have. So that comes from the taxes. Those were voted on by the taxpayers at the ballot. So we voted to allow us to collect over 2.5% so that we could fund the new school project. And so there's that debt. And then there's also the other capital improvement projects that we had prior. There's the boiler project that was there, the roof project, and with the Bagnell, we have a couple of other projects, and that is an assessment of $2,235,207. So when it's the Pentucket Middle School, the calculation is broken down again by our enrollment, and then when it's specific to Bagnell, then that's just specific to Groveland.
Do you feel confident, though, that the numbers that they provide through their assessment, based on your experience, that these are fair assessments?
I just got the book today, so I haven't had a chance to really look through exactly what they're proposing, but I know that from our financial perspective, that is not doable.
Well, I mean, I get it's not doable, but I'm saying, but as far as their assessment, not so much on this book, but previous books that you have dealt with, did you feel that their assessments have been fair as to what they're looking for, whether we can budget for it or not? I'm just looking at it from their perspective. I mean, I know as a community and as a board, our primary directive is to ensure the health and safety fiscally of our town. School is only a portion of it. And with the assessments that I've seen, plus this one here, I agree. It goes far beyond what we are capable of doing. And there's not a fair check and balance when it comes to the school, because they seem to have an open checkbook, and they just say, this is what we need to operate, and they do it. It's one of those scare tactics that they, police, fire, trash, schools, they kind of have those scare tactics where they scare people. Well, if you don't give us the money, this don't happen, the kids will suffer, and everybody's always worried about, well, we don't want the kids to get hurt. Well, there's a point in time where that argument becomes negated, because then there are other things that the community needs to do so that we can provide for everybody in the community. It's not just the kids, it's the seniors, it's, regular people. We need to provide for that. So that's why I'm asking, from your expertise, maybe not on these numbers, but previous numbers, did you feel that the assessments were fair?
It's hard to answer that, really, to be honest with you, because my experience is in municipal government. And so I expect every department head to come in and tell me that they're the best and they need all of these different things because they're their advocate for what it is that they do on a day-to-day basis. That's why I think my job and your job are the hardest jobs here, because in the select board, because it is us to say, well, that's great, but we also need to do A, B, C, D. So how do we do all of that and support you so that you can do what you need to do to carry out the basic needs of the community, and trying to weigh that against each other and prioritize those needs to make sure that everybody's getting the most out of it is the hardest thing that you can possibly do. I don't know if they need certain things for their media aid or their development supplies or what have you. I know they think they do, and I would suggest that the elected school committee would hire a superintendent with the expertise and the capabilities to put forward a budget that would meet the needs of the students and bring Pentucket forward. And I have heard many of presentations, the finance board included, that the superintendent has put forward what he's been able to accomplish and the students have been able to accomplish, and it seems like things are going really well. But is it fair? I mean, is anything of this really fair? I mean, taxes in general, like,
Has-
it is one of those things where we talk
Has-
about that all
No.
the time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my last question is, because I can go on all night on this, but I'll just make one last question. Has town council ever directed or instructed your office where you kind of represent us with the school committee when you discuss the regional agreement? Are there any legal maneuverings that we can do, put in place with the regional agreement? Unfortunately, it hasn't gotten rewritten, and I don't believe it's going to, so we're stuck with what we have. Is there any maneuvering that can be done in that to kind of rein the school committee in and say, listen, these three communities say, no, your budget, instead of 7.2 or 8%, whatever it is, we can only accommodate you 6% or 5%. That's just the way it is. Because if you flip the conversation the other way, that's kind of where we are. They just tell us, these are the numbers, you got no choice. And that's not how this is supposed to work. So has legal counsel ever given any sort of direction to your office or the select board or anybody else that these are the kind of things that we can do within the regional agreement?
Not necessarily, because the regional agreement isn't really a regional agreement with the school committee. The regional agreement is an agreement between West Newbury, Groveland, and Merrimack. It doesn't involve the school to that extent.
Okay.
It does in the sense that we are all participating to pay for the operation of the Pentucket Regional School District.
Yeah.
So that is what that agreement governs. There are provisions within that agreement that, say that the school committee shall provide this, that shall provide that, but that is ultimately also reviewed by DESE, which is a state organization, and they ultimately say, you, per Massachusetts general law, cannot require them to do that, or this language is not permissible. And essentially, what ended up happening with our recent regional agreement, to update you on that, is that we put forward some changes that were brought forward to this board and discussed with the select board and all of the tri-towns. We all agreed. We came to an understanding, and we voted and mutually put forward a proposal, and DESE redlined the entire document, and it wasn't even changes that we had made on the most recent document. It was changes that were made back in 2019 in the original document. So we looked at them, all three of the town managers and administrators were like, this is far much more of an extensive review than we were anticipating, so we need to get legal counsel involved. We need to vet this through the proper boards and authorities to make sure that this, in fact, is what we want to proceed with, and whether or not we need town council to say, no, we do need to do that. But from a financial standpoint, I don't believe that the regional agreement is really going to give you what you're looking for. In
Okay,
terms of the-
and the last question is this, just for my own edification. We are part of 3 regional school systems. I assume.
No, one.
So
Well, I thought it was 3.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Whittier and
Pentucket?
but we are not part of.
And when Triton was,
Nope.
No,
It's Essex it's North Essex, it was Essex Tech. It was
okay.
formerly called Essex
That's
Tech.
not part of Triton.
But it's
Okay.
but it's not a regional agreement. So we have
Okay.
a high school and we have Whittier. So if you cannot find a trade at Whittier or at Pentucket, you have an option under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 74, I believe, to choice into Essex Tech, which will provide agricultural, veteran, and another discipline that is not provided in either Whittier and/or Pentucket. So we only pay per tuition, per student for that school. There are other communities that are region that can send their
Okay.
students to there, like Whittier, but we are not a regional member of Essex Tech.
Okay, all right, well, I mean, I'm sure I'll have a question down the road for you as it pertains to that, but we only have 2 regional schools systems that we belong to. Pentucket is our primary, because our kids, by default, would go there. Or they would have to apply to go to Whittier, which is another
And
topic
it
for a
also
different
takes into
day, so.
consideration our elementary schools.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, and just for your own, the regional agreement is reviewed every 3 years. We've been going through it for about a year now, and it's very disheartening to know that the state redlined the entire document, that 90% of it had already been prior approved, so I guess I'm a little dumbfounded. And the other thing you need to know is, I think Dr. B kind of explained this at the last meeting we had right before Thanksgiving, which is a terrible time to do it. But there's a minimum funding requirement for every school district, right? Stop me if I'm wrong, Rebecca, refresh my memory. And if you don't meet the minimum requirements, you're actually penalized the following year with less funding than you got the prior year, which it becomes like this black hole that the further you dig down, the further it becomes unescapable. And that's where we were just a couple of years ago when we had to pass the override for 1.25 million. Because if we didn't, it basically was going to trigger a deficiency in the minimum funding requirement, which is going to trigger the following year less funding from the state, which then would have triggered a greater override just to keep the basics from the year before. So it's really, it's terrible design. I've been fighting it for over 10 years. The biggest problem we have is lack of representation at Beacon Hill. The bigger towns and cities have the greater representation, and they get the lion's share of the funding. They view regional school districts like ours as rich communities, and they should fund them much more than a city such as Boston or Fall River or New Bedford or Worcester or Springfield or Brockton. Up until just last year or 2 years ago, we had one representative in the House, and we had one senator. Now we have 2 representatives in the House. We still only have 1 senator, but we're just, it becomes a numbers game, Brian, and we're just outnumbered when the funding gets, when the money comes in to Beacon Hill and it gets to be doled out. We're always on the short end of the stick because we just don't have the representations to do it. Now, Dr. B is, I understand, is working with a collaborative of other regional school districts like ours to basically get a bigger voice at Beacon Hill so that they can understand the plight that we are in. It's the special ed costs are just astronomical. The transportation costs are just out of control. Things that were supposed to be provided 100% reimbursement by law have hardly ever been reimbursed 100%. It's a very...
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I mean, I appreciate the complexity of what this board has done previously and your office does, and the whole system in place. I appreciate all the work that's done. Like I said, it just comes back to where there needs to be some checks and balances to kind of equal out our ability as the finance board to provide the funding so that we can operate our town in a fiscal stable and healthy way. And the schools take up such a high capacity of that amount of money that it's not fair and balanced.
64 cents of every dollar.
Yeah, so I mean, that's just my position on it. I just want to ask those specific questions because it was more of a technical question to understand better. But on the personal side, I just kind of feel that, the balance needs to come back fair. I mean, the schools add value to our individual properties, so there's a reason why everybody kind of flows that way. But on the other side, there needs to be some level of fairness, and I just, want to start advocating for that, that's all. But thank you.
I don't think there's anyone here in the town that disagrees with you. We've been arguing the unsustainability of the school budget over what the state allows us to raise at 2.5% for 2 decades. without much success. This is not new, and, you know, hopefully you add another strong voice to our plight, and the Beacon Hill and our legislators and our representatives understand the situation that they're putting us in and how dire this situation is really becoming.
Go ahead.
Tax burden on
Yeah.
the folks, on the elderly who are on fixed incomes, the inability to raise the money for towns like us.
If we are not able to provide the funding that they need for this, and let's just say worst-case scenario, does the town go into receivership to pay for those fundings that we are not able to pay for? And if that was the case, what are the ramifications of that?
Not automatically, so it essentially as part of the agreement that two of the three municipalities have to be able to pay for the assessment. And then that last municipality who can't pay needs to come up with the monies to do so. That could put the town in a precarious financial situation, given however it is that we would structure
cut.
our budgets with the expenditure side. It does not guarantee it. In the past, we've almost really kind of aligned with Merrimack, and we share some of the same struggles, and therefore, whenever there's been an issue with the assessment, both Merrimack and Groveland has had to move forward with an override. In most cases, what has happened is the override has failed, and the school has to go back and adjust their budgets.
Have you ever had any experience with other town administrators that had to go back to their finance board or select boards and say to them, you need to figure out where the money comes from, and the schools will get their money over safety services in the town? I mean, is that something that potentially can happen? And that's acceptable
Yeah.
where safety services get affected by that in such a way that,
We've had those conversations.
Yeah.
That's what we worry about every year,
yeah.
every year.
So on the other budgetary
you.
updates that I have, I know I mentioned this before, but the Essex County Retirement, we received their assessment. We're only looking at a 2% increase there. Some of the other unclassified items have remained pretty steady. Memorial Day services, street lighting, the OPEB appropriation that we take from the tax for the $85,000. We're still committed to moving forward with that. Debt administration, we're looking at pretty much a level funded budget there. We have some of the debt service administration fees, some of the maturing principal and interest on our loans. For the veterans budget, we're looking at pretty much level funding the veterans budget. We are working with Mike Ingram. He's been our veteran agent for a while now. We have a part-time veterans agent. He is here at Town Hall on the last Monday of the month. We just recently were actually designated as a Purple Heart City, so you will be seeing signage go up around town. He also has been helping me with the HEROES Act and trying to figure out what we need to do in order to accept the provisions of Massachusetts general law in order to accept the statute to allow for additional tax exemptions for qualifying veterans. So he's been helping me with that. For the assessments, like we had mentioned, Whittier Tech has not come forward with their assessment at this point in time. I'm estimating, based upon what I've seen, about a 7% increase. For Essex Tech, we over budgeted for the Essex Tech last fiscal year. That's the hardest budget or line item I find in the budget, because there's really not a lot of information that I get. And I just actually received an email from them saying that they're going to be changing the allocation that they have for their special ed. So I kind of was like, all right, so how many students? And they're like, well, I can tell you what you have now, but I can't tell you what you're going to have next year. So I'm like, okay, so I can estimate whether or not, we're losing 2 seniors, we're going to get 2 freshmen, but it's kind of based upon application. So I tried to be conservative while understanding I can't leave it too high, because we did come in low that one year, and that's always scared me that we came in low. We were able to find the monies to supplement it, so we were fine, but I didn't want to leave us in that same situation. So again, that's been slightly reduced, and you'll see that. And then for
Rebecca, what was the increase for Essex again?
For Whittier vocational, I increased it for my estimate right now without having a final to 7%. So it went from 661,000 to 707,000. thousand. And then for Essex Tech, we had, estimated 276,000, and I'm still teetering, but I put it at 220,000.
And what was the percentage of that increase?
So that would be a 20% decrease,
I'm sorry?
a 20% decrease.
Okay,
And then at the last meeting, we had talked about the highway budget, so that incorporates some of the cemetery line items as well as the municipal buildings line items. And then, again, as we had discussed at the last meeting, my focus has been taking the utilities budget and the technology budget and creating a more comprehensive budget. So taking a closer look at what we have for each of those, whether it be the computers, firewall, virus protection, the Exchange Cloud, IT troubleshooting, Adobe software, and our lifecycle management that we have for our computers, ClearGov and our budgeting software, and whether or not we have our transparency and budget book. Harper's, like Michelle mentioned, we were talking about the web time and the time and attendance, as well as submitting your timesheets, not just, if you're requesting a day off. Then we had other subscriptions, so I'm trying again to bring everything in. So like Sam uses PermitLink for our building permits, then looking at My Senior Center that the Council on Aging uses, General Code, which is the codification of all of our bylaws. Then the assessor uses Assessor Pro for their appraisal software. And then fire and police use multiple different programs for investigative measures as well as scheduling. LL Data and LHS equipment for the town clerk for elections, boards, committees, things of that nature. Then we also have Vadar, which is our accounting software, and there's multiple different levels of that software that we have available to us, whether it's the remote accounts payable, as well as the utility billing, which is specifically to the water and sewer, so that's an indirect cost. And then we also looked at POs and requisitions and users, and that's based on users, so that's why that fee can sometimes fluctuate. And then we have our website and security. We are moving forward with a different website company this upcoming year, so that will cut down our costs substantially, and we are moving away from the PR firm that we utilize, so we will no longer be utilizing those services, so that will cut that down substantially as well. But then we also have Code Red and Wayne Alarm for our security system. So, for example, about all of those things I mentioned were in individual different departments. They were not all together. So if we had somebody come in and try and figure out what subscriptions we had or what we were using, it would be like, well, I know I use this, and that's not really helpful when you're looking at an organizational standpoint. So this is the first time we're actually bringing it all into a budget. So you're going to see a change in the budget and what we have allocated. So to give you an idea, when we did that, we're looking at going from $131,000 to about $216,823. So it is a big jump, but remember, there's a kind of a net zero because whatever I took from a department, I said, hey, I'm reducing your line item by $5,000 because that's what you pay for this, and I'm putting it here. In the future, they'll have to advocate for more money with the boards, and that's their right to do so, but that will then sit in that account, and then moving forward, we can plan more so accordingly, especially when there's increases to some of those subscriptions that you can't forecast, you just don't know, and you can't operate without them. Or you need to go through a procurement process. Do we get a better price? Is there a better way? Is there a better software? And that also ties into the utilities. So we have people that were buying phones, so the COA has phones, highway has phones, cemetery has phones, fire has equipment in their vehicles. Then we have all of our Comcast accounts, so if you wanted a router, so everything was just kind of disjointed. So the goal, again, was to put all of it into the utility lines and then put it under one town account. So I contacted, I think it was T-Mobile, and they were like, well, no, we can't help you because we only have the Town of Groveland COA account. I was like, but you also had the Town of Groveland building account. That's a different account. I can't talk to you. So it was like just even trying to get them to understand, like, the Town of Groveland is one Town of Groveland, like, just one town. I know there's one in Florida, but no, this is Massachusetts, and we have multiple different accounts that I want to merge and then have lines underneath. And then they're like, oh, okay. And so then the Board of Health contacted me the other day, and they're like, oh, we want to get new phones. What would that cost be? So they went out, they said, oh, it's going to cost this and this. I called T-Mobile. They're like, oh, well, you have an account with us. We'll give you 2 free phones, and we'll add you for another 20 because you're going to bundle your services. So now, instead of them going out getting their own account, I've saved money for the taxpayer, so they're not duplicating their services. So there's that aspect. And then, as we talked about, it's town property. We are paying for a phone for you to use so that you can be available to provide your job. You should not be able to take that when you leave. That's taxpayer property. So making sure that we understand that who has a phone, has it been tagged, are there proper cybersecurity type protections in place, and how we're moving forward. So that's another big increase that you'll see on the budget, which also takes into consideration, like we talked about for the highway department, because we've now added the utilities that were part of the cemetery into the utilities. So that's looking at an increase from $150,000 to $215. So it's just a 49% increase, 11% increase, but it's still one of the larger increases of the budget. And then for the employee GIC, we're still with the GIC. They have not finalized their numbers. They said it could be between a 10 to a 12% increase. They said it would maybe be on the higher end, but because we're a smaller town and we don't have as many people, it could probably fall in between. So I had estimated an increase based upon what we had last year, and we had some extra in that account, as we had discussed when we were going through the fiscal year 24 recap. So we had some turnover and some other types of savings, and people went off the insurance. So we only actually ended up needing to increase that by 2%, but we might need to increase it a little bit more because of the increase that we'll see from the state. So if they go closer to the 12, then we should go closer to the 11 instead of the 10. So that's still kind of in flux until I get that final number. And then there's my budget, and I have not asked for any changes. And then there is the select board budget, and I'm going to provide this once it's all finalized, so you'll have it, but just so you're aware. There is not much of an increase except for the fact that we have the reserve fund under there, and due to the budgetary constraints that we had last fiscal year, we had cut that down from the 30 to the 10. I would like to bring that up. We are still struggling to fund certain line items, so I have suggested that we bring it up $20,000 for right now.
Up to 20, not by.
Up to 20, yes. And I would like to increase it again if we can find some more monies. So the big outstanding, again, is the assessments for the education, the health insurance final numbers, and then the final determination on the CBA with the police. So based upon all of the numbers that I was working with, I backed into a number, and using Ellen's spreadsheet, we were able to find some areas within their budget as well that we could utilize that would not increase what we would need to add to the budget. So if everything works out well and all these calculations are correct, and Ellen said she would double check them for me, but
I've done that yet.
we are looking like we could potentially have $9,000 left over. So not a huge amount, but it's definitely better than what we had last year, which was like a $2,000 one. I think it ended up being $1,500 at the end of the day. So
After cutting everything possible last year.
yes, exactly. So we still have to check those calculations, but again, and we still have to finalize all those details. So right now we're looking like we're okay. And that brings me to my other update, is that we did have news that the governor had released her budget. So we did get our preliminary cherry sheet. So we are looking at a 2% increase in unrestricted aid, which is standard, and it does correlate with the revenue forecast that we're seeing from the state. Obviously, it's not ideal, but it will work. And we're looking at small, again, increases in veteran benefits, elderly, state-owned land. And then we also have our assessments. So those are things that we get charged for, so it kind of offsets some of the revenue that we receive. And that increased to $99,156 from $93,732. And to give you an idea of what those assessments are, it's more so for the regional mosquito, regional transportation, and some of those more like general welfare type of expenses that the state provides to us through their state agencies. In terms of local receipts, we're seeing some increases. I'm really hesitant to increase motor vehicle excise tax. It's not something that I would like to do. I did slightly increase it based upon what we're seeing. Some of the other revenue that we collect from applications are pretty much level funded. We were hoping that we could continue to see some additional revenue come in through licenses and permits, specifically for the 40B project that came in. Unfortunately, with the way that the economy is and the unforeseeable prices of materials and construction, we're not really sure whether or not we're going to see a lot of development. We also were hoping that maybe if in fact ADUs are a thing now, that we would also see some development there, unfortunately, and that too would bring in some additional fees. But again, just based upon the unknowns, we just didn't feel comfortable increasing that number. So when all is said and done, taking into consideration penalties and interest, rentals, pilot agreements, we're looking at estimating a total of $1.6 million in local receipts. So between the state aid, local receipts, and then just general property taxes, so if we're looking at the last year's levy, we're looking at $18,464,435. 2.5% on that, you're looking at $461,000. New growth, we're estimating about $158,000. That's very conservative, but that's not a number that you want to be wrong on. And then taking into consideration the debt exclusion for the town, which would include the fire truck that we purchased in 150 Center, and then the debt exclusion for PRSD, we're looking at a total of $21,358,552, just from the property side of things. So overall, and including other financing sources, sorry, I forgot that. Nothing's new there, except for the fact that, and I don't believe we actually talked about this, so my apologies if we did not, but we are looking at indirect costs. We had put forward a financial policy that this board had worked very hard on, and as part of that, we talked a lot about indirect costs, and we worked very closely with the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund. And so as part of that, some of the indirect costs are spent directly from the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund on those, such as VADAR, their health insurance, their retirement, things of that nature. But there's other things that we do internally to help facilitate their operations, such as from accounts payable, from the treasurer collector, payroll, then from my office, from an HR standpoint, legal standpoint, and to help with some of the other operational items. So taking the finance policy, taking examples, quantifying that, so if anyone questioned how much time are you spending, what rates are you using, we did that, and we were looking at charging for about $18,000 for those indirect costs. So that's an additional revenue source that we've included in our budget. Otherwise, there's been no other changes. So total, we were looking at an estimated revenue of $24,191,429. So once I get this all cleaned up, we double check on the formulas. We will be sending it out to you all for review. We will be finalizing the budget book now that we have more concrete numbers. So you'll have everything in one nice little package, and you'll also be able to review that online, similar to what you can see for the Pentucket Regional budget, where you can click on the link, it takes you to a nice visual, it has charts, graphs, and all of that good stuff. So that should be coming before your next meeting, well, before the end of February, so the last, probably school vacation week.
Great. Is that it?
That is it.
Can I
That's a
ask you,
mouthful.
I'm sorry, can I just ask you to go, I have a question about the Pentucket budget, because you said that it went up by, our operational assessment went up by 7.2.
0.2.
So, because the executive summary states that the budget went up by 4.5%, but that's because that includes the capital assessment, which really didn't go up. That's the 53 million. I guess there's just a lot of different numbers as far as what is our assessment versus the capital assessment, the operational assessment, the overall assessment. So I just wanted to make sure that I was looking specifically at that particular number, and I was having a hard time finding it and backing into it.
So is it the overall school budget increased by 4.51%, but the allocation to us increased our portion by 7.2%? Is that how you figured this?
So the projected actual budget of the 4.5%, you mean?
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the percentage shift specifically in the operating assessment towards our allocation of the 11 million to the 12 million.
And that's under the revenue projection sheet?
Yes, in section, I don't know if we have the sections on yours, but on section 2.
That's the difference of 828,000?
Exactly. So I only have because that's the only focus I have. Because again, like we said earlier, I'm more focused on what I have from year to year than I am on why they've changed their numbers.
Oh, this one here, so, right, so the 53 includes the capital, and that's going to skew that percentage. If we pull out just the operating, and then Groveland's operating, difference. Okay, I see it here.
And I did forget to inform the finance board, because you should be aware that the Whittier school, the Whittier/NECC working group has assembled, and we did have our first meeting. They did talk about the fact that the MSBA has welcomed them into potentially discussing the eligibility letter. So there are some stipulations in order for us to move forward, one of which includes the amendment of the regional agreement itself, and that has been a big challenge during the conversation. Rowley was the one community that did not sign on to the letter that said that we would entertain this working group and entertain the idea of a shared campus model. So whether or not we're able to move forward and whether or not the state recognizes that is going to be, it's going to be an interesting conversation, because we did have not a great representation at the meeting of the municipal leaders. It was more so the Whittier folks and the folks from NECC that were present at the meeting. They really kind of gave more of an overview of exactly, what they're looking at and their process. But there was really no deliberation or conversation that was had. So again, I'm not really sure what's gonna happen. Like I said, the MSBA is requiring them to look at 3 items, and the 3 items is that a letter signed by the local chief executive officer of each member community of the regional school district, evidencing that each of the 11 member communities are prepared to, so not that they have to be done, because obviously amendments of the regional agreement would cause a vote at town meeting, but amended as needed, the existing regional agreement, support the district during the feasibility study phase to examine both the existing site at Whittier and the possible relocation at the Whittier regional, to NECO, NECC, excuse me. And then proceed with the understanding that a feasibility study conducted in connection with this eligibility period will not be eligible for reimbursement, and that 100% of the cost of such feasibility study will be borne by the district. So that means that the existing one that they did for Whittier for about $2.5 million, around the same would be a cost of the district to proceed. So we would need to be willing to amend the agreement, understand that we need a feasibility study for both Whittier and NECC shared campus model, and that we would be able to pay 100% of the cost. And all of this needs to be done prior to August 1st in order to be invited into the eligibility period for next steps.
And how much does the college pay towards the feasibility? Are they part of?
They would not pay anything. As they made very clear, they do not need this. They are fine. They get a ton of money from their state and others to operate a community college. They are very successful. They just see an opportunity to be a leader. This is not something that is done in Massachusetts. It is done in other places in the country, but it is still different and unique, and we could be the first of the United States to explore something of this nature.
Is there any contractual agreement between Whittier and NECC that would
Not that I'm
negate, that from them saying, no, we're not gonna pay towards some of it?
Not that
that
I'm
you're
aware of, but it wouldn't be their responsibility to do so. I mean, this is for the amount of money that we could get towards the actual construction and moving forward with a shared campus model because of a partnership and because of NEC's involvement is the benefit to the municipalities and Whittier. Because they do receive so much funding, and if there's programming and shared campus types of modeling that supports what they're doing, we're gonna get more money towards that effort. And if it's not just the MSBA and monies that the state has already put forward as part of the millionaire's tax, and the governor's allocated that for community colleges, and this, as part of the language, I was told that there is something specific to this type of development, we could see a lot more money come in for the actual construction. Whereas with the MSBA process just for Whittier, as we saw, don't quote me, but it was about, what, $254 million? $468 million or something like that?
The total, total project, I believe, was 551, and the burden of the municipalities involved in that agreement would have been around $480 million, I believe.
You could be right, but I know that that was based upon all of the eligible students that could go to Whittier, not necessarily the students that did, which was the big hesitation for some of the communities like Newburyport, where they don't send that many people but have that many students eligible, so their contribution was much higher than you would think. And Havel sends more students to Whittier, and their percentage was lower, so there was a lot of tension there.
Rightfully so.
That's, to put it mildly.
So I just wanted to update the board because obviously there is a financial impact, and it was something that we had discussed, and I know that the superintendent had came to speak to the board about that as well. So as soon as I receive more information, I will inform the board, and I will also share with you the MSBA's letter that was sent to Whittier with the conditions moving forward.
What about the other elephant in the room?
Which one is that? The water treatment facility?
Water, yeah.
So, from my understanding, the Water and Sewer Commission has not made a determination as to whether or not they will be moving forward with either option. They are, I believe, wrapping up their study that they're doing with Havel to figure out what it would cost to enhance the infrastructure to allow for such. I know it would be something that would be done at this town meeting. They would need to do so because there is an opportunity for them to take advantage of, I forget the amount, but I think it was like half of the project, like $21 million or so for the state revolving fund. So they would be able to capitalize on that funding in that loan program. And they would need to make a determination at this town meeting. So I imagine that would be the case. But in either option, the ratepayers will be paying, and the ratepayers will be paying a substantial amount of money for either option, not one or the other.
No doubt. Okay, so we don't monopolize the conversation. Adam?
Good.
Mark?
I'm all set, thank you.
Chris? Ruth?
Do you want to vote on the minutes?
You have any questions for
Oh,
Rebecca?
sorry, I thought you were, wait, no, Rebecca's
Jim?
more than just.
Okay, we're all good. Then we will move right along to the, it was the minutes, yep. So approval of the minutes. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I will make a motion to approve the minutes as transcribed
That was from June.
from,
Yes. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
The new ones.
Yep. All those opposed and two abstentions. You opposed, Jim?
No,
Oh, okay.
He seconded it, right? Adam, motion, Jim, second. I know, I'm still dragging Jim to the grocery store after this.
Nice.
Big night.
I'll give you my list. So the next item is to plan the next meeting, and I believe we have the 26th already on the docket, so anybody have a problem with the 26th at 5 o'clock?
I'll be remote for that one.
Okay, that's not a problem. We do have remote capabilities.
When is the, what date is the school? Oh, that's on the 25th, so that's the day before, okay.
So we fine with the 26th then? Sure, do we need a motion? Motion to make the next Finance Board meeting February 26th at 2025?
Didn't we already?
I think we approved the whole slew of them.
Good, all righty then. Other items not reasonably anticipated at the time of meeting. Anybody? Nobody? All righty. Then, let's have that,
Ooh, motion to adjourn at 6:53 PM.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, any discussion? Seeing as there's none, all those in favor? Aye, all those opposed? Okay, all those abstain, great. Thank you.